All right. Welcome again to another edition of the Brotherhood Remnant Podcast. We've been away for a few weeks and we're ready to get back with it. We have a special publication to share tonight, and Rob's going to tell us all about it. And it is a publication that could have kind of set the tone for some of the exciting work that Brotherhood did in later years.
Yes.
Rob, welcome. Welcome to the Brotherhood Remnant Podcast. Rob is my co-host, and he is what we call our resident Brotherhood expert. His entire basement is filled full of Brotherhood curricula, books, memorabilia, T-shirts, underwear, you name it. He has got it. Take it away,
Thanks.
Rob.
Well, thank you, Tim.
What a way to changers, underwear, boxers, right? Okay.
No, they were actually PJs. They were unless you consider long.
No, they made boxers. They made boxers.
Yeah. No, they made boxers.
I was there when that happened. Yeah.
Too much information, but thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Well, what Tim and I have been doing, and by the way, as we begin, and I know Tim will say this at the end, number one is we want you to subscribe. This is not just a one event podcast. These are a series we're doing, and it's hopefully going to bring you some clarity as to what the Brotherhood Remnant has been for us, and what Brotherhood, I should say, has been meaning for all of us. But yeah, and then we also have a Brotherhood archive. One of the things that I've been doing, and I've been keeping Tim posted on this vast amount of material that I've been trying to digitize and to place on the Remnant. I found a piece, and Tim and I have agreed that once in a while, if we find something that looks like, that would fit, in a way, with the Brotherhood work, that we ought to just kind of highlight that, as well as continue to bring personalities on. And boy, do we have a lineup for you, but we'll save that for later. So what I was doing was I was working on digitization of some material, and we're going to show it in just a minute, but I found this piece. Don't show it yet, Tim. And I went and told Tim, I said, before World Changers, there was something else. And Tim, he pushes back in a good way to say, now, what are you talking about? What, World Changers? Okay, that's kind of a pretty significant thing, and with Andy Morris and all that. But I found something that I think could be considered a prelude to something like World Changers. So my thought was, before World Changers, we had something out there called, and here we go. Are we ready? It's called SMAY. 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 There it is. And this book, just not to spend a lot of time here, this book came out in the late 60s, early 70s. Tim, I don't know if you were aware of this, but there was something that came out around 1968 called Shaping the 70s. It was a SBC education with Sunday School Board, Brotherhood, WMU, probably involved the Home Mission Board, Foreign Mission Board of those times. And they put together an idea that as we get to the 70s, there needs to be some cultural shifts in what we do educationally. And it kind of became the theme for the 70s in reality, as we saw the 70s as being more eclectic, more freer. We had the Jesus movement in the late 60s, early 70s. Kids were doing their own thing. You probably remember hearing that phrase. Mm-hmm. And the churches were trying to capitalize on this to say, we don't want the kids, particularly the youth, to drop out or to not see church as relevant. SMAY came out as a study at the Brotherhood Commission, Home Mission Board, and WMU to say, what can we do to help young people stay connected to the church and to missions? And so SMAY was developed and organized in a booklet format to give young people some things to think about, some ideas to consider, to talk about mission action. And what Tim and I want to do is we're going to try to go through this. We won't bog us down into too much detail, but we would like to show you some pieces of this, because I think it's really, it really stuck to me as far as, this is the kind of stuff that would lead up to something as creative as World Changers. Any thoughts, Tim?
Rob, I have an awareness of a lot of Brotherhood stuff, even though I wasn't around. Obviously, I was 8 years old when this came out. Uh, I have awareness just from people talking about it or doing research or whatever. But when Rob brought this up, I mean, this was just totally blew me away. I have never heard of this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately, the night he sent it to me, I read through it, and it doesn't take long. But one thing I noticed about it, it was set for the era. I mean, you could look at the cover here, for instance. It's stylistically appealing to the late 60s. Okay. And as we get into it, Rob, I'm sure you noticed it's designed, its design follows that era. It's done very professionally. And we have a surprise at the end that we're going to share
Yes.
with you that we
Yes.
discovered in looking through this publication. So, Rob, go ahead and take us
Yeah.
through it.
Well, what I want to show you is, and you'll smile at this, Tim, because Brotherhood Commission just couldn't do a book. They also had to do a patch. See that?
Of course.
SMAY
Of course.
patch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the intention was to create a book that would motivate young people and their leadership to do summer mission projects. Part of the premise was they knew that young people had summer jobs. And so to ask them to take a whole summer off was a bit challenging, and they wanted more youth involved. Some could do that, but not everyone. So the issue was you can work and maybe take a week or two during the summer. Now, back then we had more time. When people were in school, we had from June to September off in most cases. So you had a little more time than a lot of school schedules are today. So they would say, go do your job, and then maybe on the weekends or maybe for a week, go and get involved in a project, because you'll find that project will keep you connected to the church, connected to Christ's mission, and keep you connected to people. The pages that are going to ensue, I think, just have questions. And that's what I like about this. This isn't a book about answers, but this is a book of questions that get you to thinking. So as we go through this, one of the pages I want us to look at, and if you want to go ahead and flip through, Tim, the first question is, why summer mission activity? And we've got these pictures, and again, stylistic. You see this just amazing pictures here.
And this was taken, which we will discuss later, by a very famous photographer.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like it is a cross on the roof of a building or something.
Yeah, it's an urban setting, shadow of a cross, and then they have this kind of I guess a mount. I don't know. I don't think that's a wave. I think that's an actual, like an island.
Like it could be a mountain, ocean, mountain. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And but here, this is what I like about this question: why summer mission activity? Isn't missions a year-round job? Are we limiting missions to just 3 months? And isn't missions every Christian's task, not just youth's? See, it's just questions. That's all. They're not giving you the answers. You're just saying, why even do a summer mission activity? What's the importance of that? So I answer a little bit of this, and actually you see the pictures, and the answers actually are underneath. So let me read them to you, because they're actually underneath our pictures. Before asking these questions, consider these points. Why do summer missions? Okay, here's the points. Missions is a year-round task, but the summer months offer unique opportunities not possible at any other time. Secondly, missions is every Christian's job, but youth can do some things better than others. And if you accept those two statements, this book is what you need for a summer involvement, a summer of discovery, a summer of mission activity and I love this, not for youth, but for you. For you. Do you see how they did that?
Yeah.
I love it. So anyway,
just gotta be cool,
Yeah, there it is. So that's, and again, you just have pictures of students, and there's, they're just there, Now, this is something, and we don't have time to go through all of this, but it does ask you to do some things, like it says, for optimum use, read the entire book. Adapt suggestions listed to meet your specific situations. And those suggestions may come from any section of the book. Again, they're freeing this up. They're not telling you, Tim, okay, you have to do step 1, step 2, step 3. They're being very eclectic. And they just say, go through the book, feel what you want to do, and then go and do it. Try it, experiment. And that's what's exciting about it. I do appreciate the organization of this. There was a team that was together. This was under the leadership of George Schroeder, who was executive secretary of the Brotherhood Commission, and then the executive, the director of this, because this was still considered under pioneer work or ambassador work. So Jay Chance, who was the Royal Ambassador Director, this was under his responsibility. And then there were people on here like John Scales, Charles Doggett, and then somebody that many people don't know, but I had a personal working relationship with by the name, this young lady by the name of Evelyn Tully, who eventually became the state WMU director in Illinois when I was the Brotherhood Services Director. Evelyn Tully, she's in there. She was a resource advisor along with Norman Godfrey and Roy Jennings. So this collaboration of some very good people put this together, and basically is challenging young people just to go and make it work. Don't just talk about missions or pray for missions or give, which are all important. Go out and do something. And
I think I saw Sharon Godwin in there.
I believe she's in there. Yes. I believe that is correct.
I can't really see it, but she would have been the designer, one of the designers on it, I guess.
Yes. Cover design, John Sullivan, artwork, Sharon Godwin. There she is.
Okay. And I worked with Sharon at the Brotherhood when I was there in Memphis. Okay.
Absolutely. So the idea is that SMAY was that acronym for Summer Mission Activities for Youth. And it says for Pioneer Royal Ambassadors, ACT Teens, or any other church group. So here again, Tim, is an acknowledgement that not everybody had pioneers, not everybody had ACT Teens, but most churches had youth. So why not plug them in? And who knows?
At this time, what age did pioneers go up to?
Pioneers at this point was basically what we would call the junior and senior high. By 1970, it would be grades 7 through 12. Is what it was at that time. And then ACT Teens were the same way. So it was part of that. So what you get here again is just some very these are just some great reading, just some ideas here that again, very timely for the 70s. I like this philosophical statement: no one can come close to another, let alone love him, without coming close to his sufferings.
And Rob, I don't want to sound ignorant, but mission action, when did that term first evolve, or when was that first coined at the Brotherhood? Was that something that Brotherhood came up with, or was that a WMU thing? Where'd that come from?
Well, I think it was a collaboration, because we talked a long time about mission activities and how you involved in mission activities or mission work. And again, I think through the WMU and Brotherhood working together in the mid to late 60s, you began to see a change to mission action as an actual proactive type word instead of just activities. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it does. And again, if you look at these things, taking Christian love to all places, situations where there is need, taking Christian love to persons that are victims of their own weaknesses. I mean, this was part of and again, I know it has different baggage, but we're dealing with the 70s and the late 60s, but we're dealing with the social needs of people. Young people were beginning to say, do we just pray, or do we just study the Bible, or do we go do what Jesus does and meet needs, the social needs, whether it's feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick. Now, what makes this book interesting, and I want to do a little bit of a spoiler alert, if I may, Tim, and then feel free to jump in.
Sure.
There are things today that this book challenges teens to do that we probably would stay away from a little bit, because they talk about prison ministry. And again, prisoners need, they need a witness, they need evangelism, but we have moved that more to adults than we do youth for a lot of reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any thoughts about these things that
I think you're doing a good job. I think you're doing a good job. We got a lot of this is like a 60-page book, so we'll need to move.
Okay, we got to keep moving. Well, again, once you see the pictures and you see different people, shapes, sizes, faces that are, worn by the sun, people who don't always look happy, and the idea is that mission action is the work of dedicated Christians, expanding a narrow circle of concern to a world of involvement. Again, this was an effort to say not that the church wasn't doing this, but it was to say we need to expand evangelism beyond just the immediate family or the immediate neighborhood. We've got to go beyond that, and we've got to get to places that maybe Christians could be a little bit uncomfortable going to. And so you see these places, and would you imagine that at the time of the late 60s that people would go, even surfers need Jesus, and
Beach
you
Reach,
go out there. Yeah, Beach Reach. There you go. Yeah.
Well,
And
that was
homeless people.
that's the Beach Boys, man. Everybody was into beach music in those days, right?
Absolutely. So it was a challenge to do that. And there it is. I mean, when you say that mission action is love in action. And so again, I think that was a part of it. And you see this with the guys kind of hanging out together there in a special way. So yeah. And you'll see that even in the next one, there's again, just little tiny snippets of things, as you can see, it's possible to write many definitions of mission action, to hang on all sorts of special terminology and technical language. But what it really is, what it boils down to, the bottom line, okay, let's make this work. It's people, it's individuals, persons big and small, tall, skinny, fat, weak, strong, short, round, thin, young, old people who have needs. And that's what's important. And you'll see this, the pictures are just so diverse of just people, here's a guy laying in a park, or here's a lady, I guess, sitting with her friend at a park bench. Here's a young lady just smiling, and probably just outside enjoying the day. So it's calling us to see people with needs, and how do we meet these needs, and to challenge young people. You don't have to wait till you're 25, 30, 40 years old to get involved. So they were saying, now is the time. Let's do this. Let's make it work.
Yeah, I thought some of this was a stretch for students or youth, but with like this photo here, kind of toward the left, that looks like that could be like a night street scene. Could be New Orleans, or it could be Las Vegas or something, possibly.
Yeah, and these guys could be just two people on the street, or they could be two guys who are homeless. We don't know. But it allows for the interpretation of the individual to look at that and say, "Oh, that looks like a challenge in that." Now, I have to read this to you because this is the plot, and I read this to Tim earlier, as if I was talking to Tim. I love this, and I think it's the whole. To me, it says what it's all about, and again, it's encased in a 70s approach. Listen to this. Imagine, Tim, if you will, a man, and what a man, a very impressive guy. Charismatic type, he pulls people to himself like a magnet. He builds up a terrific following, and even those who don't like him find him interesting. A whale of a guy, Tim. He's just somebody you've got to know. Anyway, he's a threat to the establishment. That's a word we'd love to use in the 70s. We'll get back to that a little bit later. But they work him over. They don't like him. They kill him. Everybody knows he's finished. And then suppose, and get this, Tim, he suddenly and mystically appears on a barren hill. Wow. He gathers his motley crew of, say, ex-fishermen, tax collectors, these dregs of the society, the bottom rung of people, tells them he's going to conquer the world, and then he disappears. And you go, what? What is he? Where's he going with this? What?
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot that isn't in there that is in there that Tim and I know, and people who read Acts and the Gospels know. But if you think about that, that's like, okay, so what do we do with that? Where do we go from here? He's gone. We've got
a modern day parable that illustrates Jesus, right?
Yes. And so we have this, and as it says in SMAY, no writer in their right mind would concoct a story like this, and then he explains that this man, Jesus, was killed by his enemies, and they buried him, hoped it was all over. And then he returns, and then he talks about the brotherhood of people, love and peace, kindness for everyone. And so again, this is a social gospel good news movement that says you can't just tell people Jesus loves you unless you've got some bread in your hand, or a shoebox, or some material that you can help somebody meet a need there. So I like that. And so the question is then, if we're going to raise a question, what do we need to do next? And this is what this book is all about. It's showing you how to put an automatic, natural Christian response to work. Tim, we don't realize this, is that, and again, this is not a criticism of our churches and what we were doing in the Southern Baptist history, but what they were saying was that lifestyle isn't just about going to church and then putting on your Christian clothes and going to do Christian things. This is about whether you're in your t-shirt and shorts or your suit, you are a Christian 24/7, and you need to remember that. And yet don't try to do things that are so big that they're out of your control. Do things that you can handle. You can deal with things. Don't get bogged down in theories and philosophies, principles, stratagems, grand designs, ambitious projects and techniques, with all kinds of gizmos. I love that, because they didn't have the technology we've got today, but they knew that gizmos are part of that. Yeah. And stumbling blindly through a hopeless maze, trying to find something concrete to do. Wander the labyrinth no more, because this book blitzes through the mishmash like a bulldozer to offer practical suggestions for workable mission projects. This is revolutionary, Tim. Yeah. We have not heard this kind of language before.
Yeah.
And again, you just have people, just walking through. There's just a picture of people walking through. Again, more natural scenes. You see the two people standing over there, and over here, they're just kind of standing there. But there's several assumptions, basic assumptions. We'll assume that since you're a Christian, you want to become involved in mission activities. And if you weren't, you have tossed this book aside by now, but you feel that there are needs in your area which you can help meet. And if you know how to meet these needs, you'll probably already be doing it. So you're a creative person and you can think for yourself. Another radical idea, because what we were doing in the 50s and early 60s was what? You just listen to your teachers and do what they tell you. Now this book is saying, y'all need to think for yourselves at times. You see a need, you need to meet it. And it says that last assumption may shock you in this conforming computerized age. But because we believe it, you'll not find a pre-digested, canned step-by-step instructions for you to sleepwalk through like a programmable automaton, whatever that, a robot. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, speaking there. Do you find any, and I just want to stop here. Do you find that kind of language is what was embedded indirectly or directly in things like World Changers? Because it was all about learning what the skills were and then go and meeting the needs.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Experiential, experiencing something and then putting your faith into action. Yes.
Yeah. They give you a recipe called SPICE. I love this. It says, select a suitable project from a list which they give us in the book. Plan thoroughly, consider all the resources, involve persons carefully, conduct projects enthusiastically, evaluate honestly and completely. Again, not a lot of steps, but just to say, do this with your eyes open, with the help of the Lord, with the help of each other. Go and do this. Work together, be a team, conduct it. And you know what? If there's a little bit of failure, if it messes up a little bit, it's okay.
That's okay.
It's all right. Yeah. So anyway, there's a plan sheet here. You can write things down, because we still needed that plan sheet to kind of at least give us some idea. As much as people liked World Changers, you and I would agree, there's a lot of administration to get ready for a World Changers project. Yeah. A lot of stuff had to be written down and planned.
That's right.
For that. So, and again, just some thoughts here, and just somebody who's thinking
very
about
abstract, kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And then they start talking about different areas where young people can help. What do you do with somebody that has trouble? And again, this was an era where there weren't a lot of ramps. There weren't a lot of people who were helping handicapped people. They kind of had to do their own thing. And then you get into the area of can you love mentally handicapped people? Now, again, they used 70s terminology in here. And I respect that, because that's what we had. They weren't being demeaning, but it is about how we view people, the sick and the aging. some of us are getting older, and we understand. It says a shut-in person leads a difficult and lonely life, but you can do something about it. People don't need to be lonely. And just because they don't look young, it's okay. Here's, the idea of a bedfast person. These folks can't even get out of bed. And it talks about girls can do women's hair. Boys can work in yards and clean up things. Or you can just sit and read. Sometimes people just need a companion just to sit next to them and read around there. Institutionalized persons. Now, again, we're dealing with areas now that we might go back. By the way, if you look at the bottom left corner, it says a Hobby Lobby is one way to help senior citizens realize that they are important. Hobby Lobby. This was before Hobby Lobby. They coined that phrase. Now it's a multi-million-dollar Christian. Would you call it a craft store? I guess is that.
I thought that was interesting. The up and around person.
Yeah. They need to be noticed. They need to be useful. They need to be understood, to have a sense of belonging, and to recognize them as individuals of worth. We forget how society had reduced these people to objects. And so we're saying, let's do something about, these folks. Here's one called the shutout person.
Oh my goodness. This applies to today.
Yeah. And what do we do? The backwoods farmer in an isolated area. This guy walks a lonely road out from the mainstream of society. He's a serviceman away from home. He's an abandoned child living in a home, a slum dweller. He's a shutout person. Do these folks need Jesus? Absolutely. Come alongside? Absolutely.
A teenager sitting in their room on their cell phone, on social media.
Exactly. And they need this. And then the idea is of having day camps. And again, these aren't necessarily brand new ideas, but it says, this is what gets kids motivated. Get them out of the house, get them off the street, get them somewhere that you can organize some games. You can have some creative artwork. You can tell them Bible stories. And so you've got this activity. Here, this could be anything. This could be a Bible study group. This could be another part of a vacation Bible school. It could be, just a neighborhood, get some kids together. It looks like they got some popsicle sticks. They're making some kind of activity. They got the New Testament. And so she's telling them story while they're doing some craft work. It's great. Now, again, juvenile homes. Some juveniles, now we're talking here not just about homes for children or teenagers. These are actually detention camps that a lot of these juveniles were in. Again, that may not be something other youth may want to participate in for the day, but at the time, these guys needed some assistance. And why not, come alongside and maybe do some tutoring for some of these kids who can't, because a lot of these guys in detention centers couldn't read and write at that time. Mission centers were very popular in the 60s and 70s. And so you had centers there. There's an East St. Louis center that still exists that went back all the way back to the 70s, Tim, still out there. And they do tutoring and they do recreation and they keep the kids off the street. And tutoring is still huge. We know now with the kids being on the cell phone, a lot of them can't even read and write. And we're not just talking about kids that live in inner city. We're talking about kids from well-to-do families. Some of them need help. We use the word transients or people who are coming in from out of town. Maybe they're farm workers, or maybe they're just people who live in the other side of town. We used to call them hobos, or just people who passing through, and they face a lot of discrimination. Migrants, we have those that come in and they come in maybe for a short term to pick fruit. They have children, and so the challenge was, do they need things like articles of hygiene, like toothbrushes and washcloths and things like that? The military. Now, again, a lot of people were literally going out of high school and going into the military. And so they were, again, it may be direct contact, or it may be that you get books or stationery, because these guys needed things to have. Care packages. Yeah. Exactly. And the youth could actually lead it with the church sponsoring it and actually doing it for some of these folks there. Again, we talked about the beach activity there. People who go on vacation. Now this was an early thing, Tim, where and we talked about this in the Brotherhood Commission. If you're going on vacation, do you just get away from church? Do you visit, a theme park, and then you just take a vacation from church too? They're saying even on vacation, you ought to plug into some of your time to do some mission work, maybe in another location, visit a church, and pick up with them. There was a mission action group guide called Resort Areas that Baptist men, Baptist women, and then ACT teens and pioneers could use as a idea sheet or idea booklet. Here's something here. Holiday Inns of Chicago have invited local churches to conduct Sunday services in their motels. This was something that was just kind of coming into its proper relationship there. You got this young boy who's pulling his lawnmower. This reminds me of my days when I would travel the neighborhoods, helping people to cut grass and just to be available, particularly for the seniors that might be around. Here's a young lady, because it was very popular in the 70s to have folk and art festivals. And so you'd have people come out playing their guitars. Now, what's interesting, Tim, and you'll smile at this, a lot of your contemporary music went from the streets now into the church. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So they have their guitars and drums actually in the sanctuary. I like this idea that, and of course you have Revelations 21:1 there, and it's in bold print, and I know you can read that, but listen to this. No age in man's history has ever been quite like it. It is a day of wonder and amazement, of moon voyages and Star Treks, of organ transplants, of distant communications, of increased leisure and affluence, and of discontent. And medical science is going to predict miracle cures for many of the diseases that plagued mankind in the past. Spontaneous communications network. We're on the verge of this. Spider webs over the land. I like that term. They didn't use the word website. They used the word spider web. Bringing instant good news and bad along with it. And the new earth is transformed into a global village where everything from war and peace can be seen instantly. In the midst of this changing, shifting, swirling minutes of a new day, people stand in the storm epicenter, perplexed, confused, bewildered. Time they've discovered refuses to stay still, grasping meaning from the present seems a hopeless, pointless task. Does that sound familiar? I'm sorry. And we're not trying to get into politics. Tim and I are not trying to do that. But do you not feel that this has transcended the 1970s?
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of that. And then I like the collages. We were, those of us who were product of the 60s and 70s, love collages. And by the way, you can see a little RA badge in there, along with this young man sitting cross-legged. And then you've got all these things going on, basically saying that this is what the world is. Yeah, it's a good piece. So that's what it's all about. What's happening? Why? Questions, answers. A song from the folk musical, which I didn't know about, called Purpose, capsules the mood of many people today. What's life all about? It's a railroad ticket to heaven, or it's a fire escape from hell. What's life all about? What's life all about? And there they are. They're pondering. These two young people here are pondering. I would have been this age in 1969, and still looking for the meaning of life. A reason for it are people your age, teenagers. A bewildered, confusing teen is unable to find any real purpose in life. He wonders what has meaning, what has value. Seeking, he turns to things like sex, drugs, smoking. He enters a dropout culture with turned out, turned off, disillusioned with life. Teenagers like that need this help. One of the few persons who can really get through to them is you, the fellow teenager, a teenager who's found the meaning of life in Christ. How? And then here's some ways. And then the book continues on by showing you some examples. Get involved in music festivals. Many of us we used to take choir tours, and this is another way of doing it. Now, we used to sing the old songs, Amazing Grace. These guys were doing hip songs like Life. There was a musical called Life, or Up with People. It dates me a little bit, Tim, but that's the kind of stuff they were singing. And teenage visitation headliners, it's what gets people's attention. Why? Because when you see teenagers doing good things, it gets people's attention, because what do they think of teenagers back then? Tuned out, dropped out, on drugs,
Yeah.
rebellious. But here are teenagers that are wanting to do something. Billy Graham crusades, Call a Teen, mail out ministry. Missionary kids have the same needs as military people. Why not write a missionary kid and let them know you're thinking about them? Remember birthdays, write these things. This is classic. Were you ever involved in a coffee house? Did you ever? I know you knew about it, but you ever? Those were cool. Now, these were coffee houses that Christians did. So it was real coffee. They would sing Christian songs. They'd pray. You'd sit around a table and you discuss things that were going on in people's lives. And it was relevant because, it was teens for teens. It was young people peer mentoring and praying with other young people. And so, and then we talk about the relevancy of that. But why we do this, and it says, take the time to study what you want to do, learn about it, get some training, talk to your pastor, get some adult leadership involved, but then let them turn you loose and let them turn you into the kind of missionaries.
They did a lot on that.
I'm sorry?
I said they did a lot on that topic.
Yes.
House. Yeah.
Yes, they did. And it talks about mission tours. Yeah. Young people need to go on a mission tour and get your group to go and just discover places that you don't normally get to. I still think those are necessary because we go. Now this is the picture I wanted. Hopefully you were going to bring up, because it shows in whatever this picture was taken in 1968, 69,
68. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People painting. What do you think, Tim? Do you think they're digging a foundation? That's what it looks like.
I don't know, but the painting looked like it could have come out of a World Changers brochure.
Yeah.
I don't know. It looks like they're digging or doing something like that.
Yeah, something with a ditch or a fountain. Now that may be bigger than World Changers, because that looks very intense. Because most of the time, World Changers was just renovating homes and that. But these guys were. These guys were doing just all kinds of things.
Serious work. Yeah,
absolutely. And so it just says, and then what happens is, and this is where, just like World Changers, get these young people involved, get them excited. They'll go back to their church and say, we need to do more in our church too. We don't need to just go out and take care of, these great projects. We need to come back and continue to grow ourselves. And here's where pioneers, act teens, Sunday school work, and all that played a very important part in this. And also, sit down and talk. Here again, the leaders are being told, listen carefully to your teens' evaluations. What they don't say may be as important as what they do say.
That's right.
And so leaders have got to be on that. So these are resources for all the things we talked about.
Did you read through these?
I read some of those. Yeah. Now that you would be hard pressed to find these things today.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And the cost of those are amazing. For that. Tim, let me just do this real quickly, because while we're on the subject, look at this. The ultimate miracle.
Let's do one thing here. Let's kind of finish it up.
Well, I wanted to show you this other book before you got to your surprise. But
okay.
Do you want me to, or do you want to read? Do you want to read?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
The ultimate miracle of love is this: that love is given to us to give to one another. I like that.
Well, that's a classic photo right there.
It really is. It really is. Now, what I found fascinating was that this system started appearing in other places. So in 1982, Baker House came out with a book called The Go Book. And the Go Book was a youth, I'm trying to get this term word. There we go. The Go Book was an outreach tool for youth groups. And they have construction ideas in here, and just some really good stuff. This book and SMAY are located on our Brotherhood archives, and I'll show it one more time. Maybe that way, since she's got me trying to get it where it's not shiny so much. See that guide to community outreach for youth groups?
Yeah,
and it's a great piece. It's a great piece, and it follows the same thing as SMAY does. Mm-hmm. It's just a series of whole ideas on that. Tim, you said you had a surprise.
Well, here is the back of the book. Okay. This is the very back of the book. And if you'll see, it's kind of covered up because I'm controlling this and the arrows are popping up, but you'll see the picture of the the young lady and the young man there. And you probably can't read that writing, but the person that contributed to this publication, I'm sure they had to pay him a fairly decent wage. We looked up the name, and I'm going to pop this up right here. His name was Edward Wallowich. And I looked it up and it said photo by Wallowich. And I thought, okay, that's either a photo service, which probably didn't exist then. That's kind of a joke, or somebody noteworthy. And you can read who this guy was. He's an American art photographer who made himself known early in life. He had his collection at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which is a pretty big deal. He was a decorated young photographer. Obviously, I read, this is not on here, but he was a street photographer. He did a lot of street photography. And if you know anything about photography today, or even through the last 20, 30 years, street photography is a big thing. People always having their camera with them and being able to shoot, things that are happening on the street, just to kind of document life, that sort of thing. And he was active in the 40s and through the 70s. But here's the thing, it's kind of interesting. Oh, he was a friend of Andy Warhol, which is, if you know anything about Warhol, he was a famous, rather controversial artist. But they must have bought these photos from Wallowich, or he either contributed them because he believed in the work with teenagers. And if you'll see there, I put a little arrow here. You can see a photo by Wallowich. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those street pictures that probably these two people were together. This is not, I would guarantee you that this was not staged.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because he was a street photographer. So a lot of those photos, if you remember the one at the very beginning of the book that had the cross.
Yes.
Okay. I figure that he took that because of the imagery that was, and he didn't take all the photos in the book, but he took several of them. And I think that they identified with him because of the kind of work that he did.
I'm gonna try to go either to Barnes and Noble, because I go there pretty regularly, and they have albums of photographs, and I'm going to see if he's got a collection of bound photos, because it would be fascinating to see. Yeah, many of the pictures
he died in the 1980s.
Okay.
But anyway, I thought that was fascinating that they would, use someone like that in a Southern Baptist publication.
Well, and yeah, because most of the time we had our own photographers and we had our own photo library. So this really pushed, again, it tells you that the envelope was being pushed by this book.
Yeah, they were pushing the envelope, weren't they?
They did. And I'll say this, Tim, and this, I don't want to sound like a downer here, because I really think that because and this in a lot of organizations, when you push the envelope, sometimes it gets pushed back on you. And I say this with kind of a sadness about it, because SMAY never really took off. But I also will say this, Tim, to the credit of you and Rusty and Andy and many of the others with World Changers, the way was paved so that when World Changers came up, and I'm sure there were naysayers, we talked about that there were a few people that didn't think that was going to work well, and it was going to take a lot of time and effort and expense until they saw it happen. And then everybody got on board and said, oh yeah, it's good stuff. But unfortunately, SMAY never did make the level that I think it could have made until others like you and Rusty came along and started to expand Brotherhood work to say, you know what, it can't just be about pioneers. It's got to be about all young people.
Yeah. And the groundwork was definitely laid by SMAY, and of course work that came before it and work that came after it, because this was 68. Well, World Changers didn't start until 90. Of course, when I came to the Brotherhood, Brotherhood was all the publications had a mission action aspect.
Yes.
So it was not a new thing, but it's kind of like Steve Jobs, the inventor of the founder of Apple and Macintosh and all that kind of stuff. He said, the best ideas are stolen, you know, or
Yes.
borrowed from other people. And that is so true because, you have to, you take what has gone before, whether it was successful or unsuccessful, whatever,
That's
and
true.
you adapt it to the modern age, the time that you live in.
Well, think of those early days, whether it was Steve Jobs or Coca-Cola, when
Yeah.
people were asked, "Would you like to invest in that?" I mean, can you imagine going to Steve Jobs and says, "I've got $100. Could you use that to do whatever you're doing with the technology?" A
Yeah.
lot of the times, people are nervous about that, and yet we know the people that invested. And again, I'm just picking those two out. Invested in Apple or invested in Coca-Cola. I don't think they're doing too bad. Now, I'm that's a business thing, but
Yeah.
it fits in the same way. When you got something fresh and new and innovative like SMAY or even World Changers or other things that came along,
Yeah.
co-ed mission education, that took a lot of work,
Mhm.
which we'll talk about sometime because we've got mission kids and some other things we'll do. Again, not to be a spoiler alert, but I want to talk about that because you and I know the struggles it went through just to get people to cooperate together
Yeah.
in an effort to
And
say,
and we've discussed this at length in other podcasts related to World Changers, and you can go to our YouTube channel and check those out. Uh, but the fact that World Changers, it still does exist. It does exist, not quite on the large scale that it was back in the day, but a lot of that has trickled down to the local church that does their own mission trips. They have seen the example of World Changers and
yeah,
other, you know, uh, mission action project type events and things like that, and they integrate them
yes,
into choir tours. Even they may even have a couple of days where they do, build, a handicap ramp for someone or something like that. So,
yes,
and honestly, in the early days, that was the whole idea, to not only give churches an opportunity to be a part of something like World Changers, where the youth minister had to do very little, basically had to train their students and then take their students to whatever project they were going to. Everything
yes,
was prepackaged, or or afterwards, or even as an offshoot of that, they could do their own projects, locally, regionally, nationally, and even internationally. And that did happen. In fact, that was the model that we had at a church I was at, Georgia. We did around the Acts 1:8 model,
yes.
taking it both locally all the way to internationally with
Yeah.
students.
Yeah, and the balance between short and long-term projects, because they knew that most of your young people couldn't do the
Exactly.
long-term projects.
Exactly.
But
We would have students at our church that would do a 1-day mission action project or activity that would never go on a 7-day, at that time, World Changers project.
yeah,
And we would have students that would go on a trip overseas that would never, that wouldn't do much otherwise. So, I mean, we
no,
we were
yeah,
we
it's
made
a
it, we offered lots of opportunities for lots of
opportunities.
different types of students.
Tim, I wish we could go back and look, and maybe one day we'll uncover it, maybe within my own stuff or somewhere out there. But like we've talked about with RAs, Crusaders, Pioneers, and all, how that impacted, and GAs and Acteens too, how that impacted missionaries. I wonder how SMAY and World Changers may have developed into a lifestyle of saying, you know what, I can be a Christian, which I should be 24/7, and it leads into ministers, pastors, missionaries, all sorts of people, or just
Yeah.
laymen who say we just want to continue to share Christ with people.
Yeah. And I know we need to wrap this up, but that's a
Yeah.
great point. I feel like that's where, a lot of our churches are missing out today, because there is not a programmatic approach to missions in the church like it used to be,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
that's what was the purpose of those programs. Bring them up young, and then give them opportunities throughout their growth cycles,
Amen.
and which would ultimately culminate in, we know this to be a fact, a lot of RAs became missionaries.
Yes.
um, and now you just wonder where those missionaries are coming from.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let me say this, as you said correctly, and that is check out this Remnant archive place, because we're
Yeah.
putting these things out there, and they're there. And if we're bringing up a subject matter, we want it definitely to be there for you. So that is something that is offered to you. We love your comments, thoughts, questions, likes, even dislikes. Whatever we can do to help. But here they are. They're categorized the best way we can do it. I'm trying to get those filled in as I get it, and I got a lot of stuff that I want to get in there, so that it's good material. Yes, and it looks like, well, Rob, why'd you put 2 sets in there? One of them is just the front cover of some of these, and then the other one is the whole manual, the whole booklet. So if you needed to show just the cover, you don't have to download the whole book. But you can go and retrieve these things, look at them, study them, and I think you can even download them and print them out. I think.
Oh yeah, Rob adds resources practically every week. Last week, I found some resources out on the web that from the Home Mission Board and the Foreign Mission Board, and I uploaded those. So we're just we're trying to put these things in one place that we feel like are pertinent to those that are interested in missions, either from a historical standpoint or want to use some of these resources to do things today. And you'll see at the bottom there, we have our blog, the Brotherhood Remnant, which has been in existence since, 2006.
And I think you're right.
Yeah, it's at the brotherhoodremnant.blogspot.com. You can email us at thebrotherhoodcommission@gmail.com. And of course, you're watching this on our YouTube channel, and please check out the other videos that we've done on different topics. And we hope to post several new ones soon. Rob, you might tell them just a little bit about what we're working on.
Well, let me say this real quick, but you're right. By the way, if you have any historical documents yourself and you want to download them to us, let us know about it. We'll figure out how to do it, especially if it's a large file, or if you want to point us to some resources that you found that you want to be aware of. But yeah, we've got some, we're going to be talking to some people. Are we talking to personalities we're talking about now? Some of the topic areas? Yeah, we're going to be talking to our last Brotherhood president down the road, Jim Williams. And we're going to include him in some podcasts in the future. We're also in touch with Rusty Griffin, who is also one of our originators of World Changers, as well as other things. He was very much into co-ed mission education and that. We've got some others too. Do you have some others that we're thinking about?
Those are the 2 immediate ones. We actually have done Rusty, and we had some technical difficulties, so we're going to have to re-record him.
Yes.
But it was a very interesting interview, and I'm telling you, Rusty was a catalyst in making sure that World Changers happen, and I think that'll be a very interesting interview. You got anything else for us, Rob, as we...
No, actually, I think we're done, but thank you so much for being here, and we love to hear from you. We love for you to subscribe. We're doing this to help keep these things out there so you have access to them. Check out our stuff. It's really good, even if Tim and I barely scratch the surface on some of these things. It's worth your time, and you will appreciate what we're uncovering.
Yeah. And we'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you all for being here. Tim, thank you again. We'll be back out pretty soon again.
Yeah. All right. Good night.
Take care, friends. Good night.
Okay. I ended the recording.
Good.
We went 53 minutes.